Tom had always prided himself on being successful. His career as an executive in a growing company had been everything to him for years. Yet, somewhere along the way, his personal life began to feel like an afterthought. His marriage to Lisa had started out as a fairy tale, full of dreams and hope for the future. But as the years passed, the spark between them had slowly faded. They had 2 children, Ryan and Sophia, who were both growing up before their eyes. Yet the more he saw of them, the more distant he became, both physically and emotionally. It wasn't that Tom didn't love his family. He did. He simply didn't know how to balance the pressures of his career with the demands of home life. Tom had spent long hours at the office, chasing promotions and striving for recognition. Each step forward in his career seemed to push him further away from the people who mattered most. Lisa had always supported him, but Tom could see in her eyes that she was beginning to feel the weight of his absence. She was doing her best to hold everything together, but it wasn't enough to close the gap between them. One evening, after another long day at work, Tom came home to find the house quiet. Lisa was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, while Ryan and Sophia were in their rooms. Tom stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her as she moved about the kitchen. He could see the tiredness in her face, the exhaustion of juggling everything on her own. She had always been strong, but now there was a sadness in her eyes that he couldn't ignore. "Hey," Tom said softly as he walked into the kitchen. Lisa turned, offering a small smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Hi, Tom. Long day." "Yeah, you could say that," Tom replied, running a hand through his hair. "I've been thinking, though." Lisa looked up from chopping vegetables, her eyebrows raised. "About what?" "I think I need to take some time for myself," Tom said quietly. "I'm feeling lost, like I'm stuck in this routine, and it's starting to weigh on me. I'm not sure if I can keep going like this, pretending everything's fine." Lisa put down the knife, her face filling with concern. "What do you mean? You're talking like you're going somewhere." Tom hesitated, his thoughts racing. He had never said these words aloud, but they had been building up inside him for months. "I think I need to leave for a while. I need to figure things out. I don't know if I can be the husband and father you want me to be right now." The silence between them was heavy. Lisa's face went pale, and for a moment Tom regretted saying anything. But he couldn't take it back now. This was something he needed to do. At least, that's what he thought at the time. Lisa blinked back the tears that started to form in her eyes. "You're leaving? Just like that? You can't be serious, Tom." "I need to do this, Lisa. For me," Tom said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I need space to breathe. I've been putting my career ahead of everything, and it's not working anymore. I'm not the man I used to be." Lisa turned away, trying to keep her composure. "And what about us, Tom? What about the kids?" Tom felt the sting of her words, but he had already made up his mind. "I'll still support you. I'll still be there for the kids, but I need to figure this out on my own." With that, Tom walked out of the kitchen, leaving Lisa standing there, her heart breaking as she realized that her husband was about to leave their family. And she had no idea when, if, he would ever return. Tom had spent months planning his departure, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of living alone. At first, the quiet apartment felt like freedom. It was just him, no responsibilities, no expectations. His days were filled with work, and his evenings were spent alone, watching TV or reading. He thought the peace would give him the clarity he needed, but instead, he found himself feeling more lost than ever. He hadn't realized how much he missed his family until he was living without them. The laughter of his children, Ryan and Sophia, seemed like a distant memory. He had always prided himself on being a provider, but now, alone in his apartment, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. His work, which had once been a source of pride, no longer felt fulfilling. Promotions and accolades meant nothing if he didn't have the people he loved around him. As the weeks passed, Tom tried to focus on his career, hoping that the constant work would help fill the emptiness he felt. He threw himself into long hours at the office, pushing his team to meet deadlines and exceed expectations. But no matter how much success he found in his job, it never seemed to make up for the absence of his family. The loneliness grew, and with it, a quiet regret. Occasionally, he would get a text from Lisa. They had agreed to keep in touch for the sake of the children, but the conversations were always short and awkward. Lisa was polite but distant. She had her own life to manage now, and she didn't seem to need him as much as she once had. Tom couldn't blame her. After all, he had left her to raise their children on her own. It wasn't easy, but Lisa had handled everything with grace. In many ways, she had become stronger without him. Ryan and Sophia, now teenagers, had their own lives as well. They didn't seem to miss him as much as he expected. They had grown used to him not being around. Tom had always been busy with work, and now his absence felt permanent. It hurt to know that his children were growing up without him, but he couldn't turn back the clock. He had made his choice. One afternoon, as he sat at his desk in the office, Tom received a message from Lisa. It wasn't unusual for her to check in, but this time, the tone of her message was different. She asked if he could come by the house that weekend to discuss something important. Tom's heart raced. Was there something wrong? Was she angry with him? He didn't know what to expect, but he agreed to come over. The weekend arrived, and Tom drove to Lisa's house, his thoughts swirling with questions. When he walked through the front door, Lisa greeted him with a polite smile, but there was something in her eyes, something he couldn't quite place. She asked him to sit down, and as he did, she told him something that would change his life forever. "You're a grandfather, Tom," Lisa said quietly. "We have quadruplets." Tom's mind went blank. He hadn't expected this. Quadruplets. How could that be possible? The last time he had seen Lisa, they had 2 children. What was going on? As Lisa explained the situation, Tom's world began to shift. He was about to meet children he had never known existed, and the realization hit him hard. He had left a family behind, not just his wife and older children, but 4 new lives that were now a part of his past and his future. Tom sat quietly as Lisa explained the situation. His mind was racing, trying to make sense of what she was saying. Quadruplets. He couldn't believe it. How had he missed this? How had he not known that his family had grown while he was away? His thoughts were a whirlwind, filled with confusion, guilt, and disbelief. Lisa took a deep breath and looked at him, waiting for his reaction. "Tom, I know this is a lot to take in, but I thought you should know. The babies are healthy and doing well. I didn't know I was expecting multiples until later in the pregnancy, and when I found out, I didn't want to burden you with it." Tom stared at her, still processing the words. I don't even know what to say," he finally managed to say, his voice low. "I had no idea." Lisa nodded, understanding the shock on his face. "I know, Tom. I didn't want to make it harder than it already was. After you left, I focused on raising Ryan and Sophia. When the quadruplets arrived, it was overwhelming. But I didn't want to involve you. You needed time to figure out your own life." A wave of guilt washed over Tom. He had left his family behind, believing that he was doing what was best for him. But now, seeing the reality of what he had missed, the life he had abandoned, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of regret. How had he not known? How had he been so blind to the people he loved? "Do they know about me?" Tom asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Have you told them I'm their father?" Lisa shook her head. "Not yet. They're still so young. I didn't know what to say, and it felt like too much for them. They know you're their father, but it's different now. They'd grown up without you." Tom felt his heart sink. He hadn't been there for Ryan, Sophia, or the new babies. His decision to leave had affected them all in ways he could never have imagined. He had missed out on so much. First steps, birthdays, and now, the birth of 4 more children who would never know him the way they should have. I want to meet them," Tom said finally, his voice full of emotion. He couldn't undo the past, but he could make an effort to be part of their future. He had to try, for their sake and his own. Lisa's expression softened as she saw the sincerity in his eyes. "I think that's a good idea, Tom. It won't be easy, but they deserve to know their father." The thought of meeting the quadruplets filled Tom with a mixture of excitement and fear. He had no idea how to connect with them, or if they would even accept him after everything that had happened. But one thing was clear: he needed to try. For the first time in years, he felt like he had a chance to make things right. Lisa led Tom into the living room, where the quadruplets were sleeping in their cribs. The sight of them, tiny and perfect, stirred something deep within him. He had missed the chance to be there for their birth, to witness their first days of life. But now, looking at them, he realized that there was still time. Time to build a relationship, time to make up for the lost years. As Tom gazed at the 4 babies, he knew that this moment would change everything. His life, once defined by career and personal freedom, would never be the same again. And for the first time in a long while, he felt hopeful. There was a chance for redemption, a chance to make things right. Tom sat on the edge of the couch, nervously watching the babies sleep. Ella, Maya, Lucas, and Isla lay quietly in their cribs, their tiny chests rising and falling with each gentle breath. They were so small, so fragile, and yet they were his children. 4 little lives he had never known. 4 lives he had missed out on. The weight of it all pressed down on him as he thought about how much time had passed and how much he still didn't know about them. He felt a surge of emotion, love, guilt, regret, and a deep sense of responsibility. How could he make up for the years he had been absent? How could he find a way into their hearts when they had grown up without him? After a few moments of silence, Lisa walked into the room, gently pulling Tom from his thoughts. She smiled softly as she looked at the babies. "They're asleep now," she said quietly. "It's a good time for you to meet them." Tom stood up slowly, his hands trembling slightly. He had never felt so unsure of himself, but this was important. This was his chance to be part of their lives. He took a deep breath and walked toward the cribs. Ella, the curious one, had the brightest eyes and a tendency to watch everything around her. Maya was quieter, a little shy, and seemed to soak up her surroundings with careful observation. Lucas had a playful spirit, even in his sleep, his little fingers curling into fists as if ready to take on the world. Isla, the calm one, was at peace, her tiny body almost perfectly still as she slept soundly. Tom gazed down at them, overwhelmed by the sight. He had imagined what it would be like to meet them, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality. 4 perfect little beings, his children, sleeping peacefully, unaware of the world around them, unaware of the man who had abandoned them. As he reached down to gently touch Ella's tiny hand, he felt a rush of emotion. He wasn't sure if he was ready to take this step, but he knew he had to. For them, for Lisa, for himself. "This is real," Tom whispered to himself. "This is my family." Lisa, standing quietly behind him, watched Tom carefully. She had been through so much over the years, raising the kids on her own, dealing with the challenges of being the single mother. But now, seeing Tom here, trying to connect with the babies, she felt a mix of hope and wariness. It would take time to rebuild what they once had, and she wasn't sure if it was possible. But she also understood that this was a moment they couldn't ignore. "They're still so young," Lisa said gently, breaking the silence. "They don't understand the past. They just need to know that you're here now." Tom nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He wasn't sure where to begin, but he knew he had to start somewhere. "I want to be part of their lives, Lisa. I want to make up for lost time." Lisa smiled, a hint of sadness in her eyes. "It won't be easy, Tom. They've had years without you, but they deserve a chance to know you, and you deserve a chance to know them." Tom reached out and gently picked up Maya, who stirred slightly but remained asleep in his arms. As he held her, the enormity of the moment hit him even harder. This little girl, so small and vulnerable, was his daughter. He had missed so much, but he was determined to be there now. He sat back down on the couch, holding Maya close. The room felt different now. The emptiness he had felt before, when he first arrived, was slowly being replaced by a sense of purpose. He wasn't sure what the future held, or how the children would react to him in the long term, but he knew one thing for sure: he was here to stay. For the first time in years, Tom felt a glimmer of hope. He had made a mistake by leaving, but maybe, just maybe, he could still find a way to make things right. He just had to take it one step at a time. Tom sat in the living room, feeling the weight of the silence around him. He had been spending more time with Ryan, Sophia, and the Quadruplets, but despite his efforts, he still felt like an outsider in his own family. The connection he hoped to rebuild wasn't happening as quickly as he had hoped. His heart ached as he watched the kids interact, seeing the strong bond they had formed with Lisa over the years, a bond he had missed out on. Ryan and Sophia were older now, almost teenagers. They had their own lives, their own routines, and while they weren't angry with him, they seemed to accept his presence with distant politeness. Tom knew it was understandable. They had grown up without him, and he couldn't just walk back into their lives as if nothing had happened. He could see the confusion in their eyes when they spoke to him, as though they were trying to figure out who this man was who suddenly wanted to be part of their lives again. The Quadruplets were a different story. Ella, Maya, Lucas, and Isla were still so young, but they had their own personalities already. Ella was bubbly and full of questions, constantly reaching out to Tom with her bright, curious eyes. Maya was quieter, more reserved, and Tom often felt like she was watching him, sizing him up in a way that made him feel unsure. Lucas was energetic and always on the move, while Isla had a calm, peaceful nature that seemed to calm the whole house when she was near. But despite the differences in their personalities, all of them had one thing in common. They didn't know Tom the way they should have. He wasn't their father in the way that Ryan and Sophia knew him. They hadn't shared the experiences and memories that come with being raised by someone. Instead, they had grown up in Lisa's world, without the influence of the man who was supposed to be their father. Tom spent hours playing with them, trying to engage them in games and conversations. But every time they laughed or ran off to do something else, he couldn't help but feel like an outsider. He was trying to catch up on everything he had missed, but it was harder than he expected. The bond between them wasn't instant. He couldn't expect them to just accept him as their father after years of being absent. They needed time. One evening, after the kids were asleep, Lisa and Tom sat in the living room together. The house was quiet, but the weight of the unspoken words between them felt heavy. "Tom," Lisa said, her voice soft but serious, "I can see you're trying, but I think you need to understand something. The kids are confused. They don't know how to feel about you being here. And it's not just about you. It's about them, too. They've been through a lot without you." Tom nodded, his eyes downcast. "I know. I've been thinking about that a lot. I don't expect everything to be perfect right away, but I want them to know I'm here. I want to be a father to them, to all of them. I want them to know they matter to me." Lisa sighed, her gaze softening. "They do, Tom. But it's going to take time. It's not going to be easy. You've missed so much of their lives. But I'm glad you're here now. I just need you to understand that it's not just about you. It's about us building something together again, and that takes patience." Tom felt a deep sense of responsibility in her words. He had hoped for an easy return to family life, but he realized that wasn't going to happen. He needed to show the kids that he wasn't going anywhere. He had to prove to them that he was there to stay, no matter how long it took. The next day, Tom spent more time with the kids, especially the Quadruplets. He took them to the park, played with them on the swings, and listened to their small stories and giggles. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. In his heart, Tom knew that the road ahead would be long, but he was ready. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was doing something meaningful. And maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to make things right. The weeks passed, And Tom continued to spend time with his children, slowly finding his place in their lives. It was not easy, but he was determined to make up for the lost time. Every day, he learned a little more about them. Ryan was growing into a young man, interested in sports and hanging out with friends. Sophia, always thoughtful, loved to read, and often helped Lisa with household tasks. The quadruplets, though still young, had their own little personalities that were starting to shine. One afternoon, Tom found himself in the backyard with the kids. Ella had decided that she wanted to have a picnic, and she was busy laying out a blanket and filling a basket with pretend food. Maya was sitting quietly beside her, drawing pictures in a notebook. Lucas was running around, full of energy, while Isla watched her siblings, taking in everything with calm curiosity. It was moments like these that Tom had missed, simple, peaceful moments that filled him with warmth. As Tom sat down on the grass, Ryan came over and tossed him a ball. "Catch, Dad," he said, his voice easy and casual. Tom smiled, a little surprised at how natural it felt. He threw the ball back, and they spent the next few minutes tossing it back and forth. It wasn't a long conversation, but it was enough. For the first time in a long while, Tom felt like he was a part of something again. He wasn't just observing from the outside. He was participating in their world. Later that afternoon, Sophia joined them, carrying a glass of lemonade for Tom. She handed it to him with a smile, and for a moment, they just sat there, watching the kids play. Tom noticed the little details, the way Maya hummed as she drew, or how Lucas laughed when he tumbled to the ground, then immediately got up and kept running. It was small, everyday life, but it was full of love and joy. "I'm glad you're here, Dad," Ryan said as he sat down beside him, wiping his brow. It's good to have you around." Tom felt a lump in his throat at those words. He had been waiting for some sign that things were improving, and now, with Ryan's simple statement, it felt like a small victory. "I'm glad to be here, Ryan," Tom replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I know I've missed a lot, but I'm not going anywhere." The words came out without him thinking about them, but they felt true. For the first time in years, Tom felt like he had a purpose again. He didn't know what the future would look like, or how long it would take to fully rebuild his relationship with his kids, but he was committed. He had a second chance, and he wasn't going to waste it. That evening, after the kids went to bed, Tom sat with Lisa in the living room. The house was quiet, but the air felt lighter than it had in a long time. "Things are better, aren't they?" Lisa said softly, glancing at Tom. "It's not easy, but they're starting to open up to you." Tom nodded. "It's slow, but every day, I feel like I'm getting closer. I know I can't change the past, but I can be here now. That's what matters." Lisa smiled, a genuine warmth in her eyes. "You're right. It's all about showing them you're here. That's what they need." Tom realized that this journey wasn't just about fixing what was broken. It was about building something new, something stronger. It would take time, but for the first time in a long time, he was willing to put in the effort. As he sat in the quiet house that night, Tom knew that small steps were still steps forward, and he was ready to take them, no matter how long it took. The path ahead wasn't easy, but it was worth it. The days continued to pass, and Tom began to feel like he was settling into his new role. It was far from perfect, and there were still moments of doubt, but he was slowly learning how to be a part of his children's lives again. One Saturday morning, Lisa suggested that Tom take the kids to the local park. It was a simple outing, one that families often enjoyed together, but to Tom, it felt like a huge step. He had spent so much time in the past worrying about his career and his own needs that he had never really experienced these small, yet meaningful, moments with his family. The thought of spending time with all of them, of showing them that he cared, was overwhelming. He picked up Ryan and Sophia, who were already excited for the day, and then they went to the park with the quadruplets. As they arrived, the sun was shining, and a light breeze made the trees sway gently. The park was busy with families, some playing on the swings, others enjoying picnics on the grass. Tom took a deep breath, ready to dive in and be present for his family. Tom helped Lisa set up a picnic blanket near the playground, while the kids quickly ran off to explore. Lucas and Ella ran toward the swings, while Maya and Isla stayed close by, looking around at the other children. Tom sat down beside Lisa, watching the kids interact with each other. It was a normal, everyday scene, but to Tom, it felt like a precious gift. This was the life he had missed, these simple moments of joy and togetherness. As the kids played, Tom and Lisa shared small talk. Nothing too deep, but it was nice to just talk again. It had been a while since they had shared a conversation that wasn't about schedules or parenting responsibilities. There was something soothing about the way they connected, the familiarity that had always been there between them. They may not have been able to turn back time, but they were finding a way forward, one day at a time. After a while, Ryan and Sophia invited Tom to join them for a game of catch. It had been years since they had done anything like that, but Tom eagerly agreed. He felt a rush of excitement, even though his throws weren't as accurate as they used to be. The kids laughed and joked, teasing him about his aim, but the joy in their laughter filled Tom's heart. As they took a break and sat on the grass, Ryan turned to Tom with a shy smile. "You're not so bad at this, Dad." Tom grinned, his heart swelling. "Thanks, Ryan. I'm just trying to keep up with you." For a moment, there was no tension, no distance between them. It felt as if the years apart had melted away, even if just for a few hours. Tom realized that this was the start of something new, something he had been waiting for without even knowing it. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was still open. He had the chance to be the father his kids deserved, and he wasn't going to waste it. Later that day, as the sun began to set, the family packed up and headed home. The kids were tired, but happy, and Tom felt a sense of peace that had eluded him for so long. He had spent so much time focused on what he had lost, but today, for the first time in years, he was focused on what he had gained. The time with his children, the laughter, the simple joy of being a family. It was more than he could have ever hoped for. As they drove home, Tom glanced at Lisa, who was smiling contentedly. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start, and that was enough for now. Tom knew there was still work to do. The road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but he was ready. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was on the right path, a path that led to the family he had always wanted. The days continued to pass, and Tom began to feel like he was settling into his new role. It was far from perfect, and there were still moments of doubt, but he was slowly learning how to be a part of his children's lives again. One Saturday morning, Lisa suggested that Tom take the kids to the local park. It was a simple outing, one that families often enjoyed together, but to Tom, it felt like a huge step. He had spent so much time in the past worrying about his career and his own needs that he had never really experienced these small, yet meaningful moments with his family. The thought of spending time with all of them, of showing them that he cared, was overwhelming. He picked up Ryan and Sophia, who were already excited for the day, and then they went to the park with the Quadruplets. As they arrived, the sun was shining, and a light breeze made the trees sway gently. The park was busy with families, some playing on the swings, others enjoying picnics on the grass. Tom took a deep breath, ready to dive in and be present for his family. Tom helped Lisa set up a picnic blanket near the playground, while the kids quickly ran off to explore. Lucas and Ella ran toward the swings, while Maya and Isla stayed close by, looking around at the other children. Tom sat down beside Lisa, watching the kids interact with each other. It was a normal, everyday scene, but to Tom, it felt like a precious gift. This was the life he had missed, these simple moments of joy and togetherness. As the kids played, Tom and Lisa shared small talk. Nothing too deep, but it was nice to just talk again. It had been a while since they had shared a conversation that wasn't about schedules or parenting responsibilities. There was something soothing about the way they connected, the familiarity that had always been there between them. They may not have been able to turn back time, but they were finding a way forward, one day at a time. After a while, Ryan and Sophia invited Tom to join them for a game of catch. It had been years since they had done anything like that, but Tom eagerly agreed. He felt a rush of excitement, even though his throws weren't as accurate as they used to be. The kids laughed and joked, teasing him about his aim, but the joy in their laughter filled Tom's heart. As they took a break and sat on the grass, Ryan turned to Tom with a shy smile. "You're not so bad at this, Dad." Tom grinned, his heart swelling. "Thanks, Ryan. I'm just trying to keep up with you." For a moment, there was no tension, no distance between them. It felt as if the years apart had melted away, even if just for a few hours. Tom realized that this was the start of something new, something he had been waiting for without even knowing it. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was still open. He had the chance to be the father his kids deserved, and he wasn't going to waste it. Later that day, as the sun began to set, the family packed up and headed home. The kids were tired, but happy, and Tom felt a sense of peace that had eluded him for so long. He had spent so much time focused on what he had lost, but today, for the first time in years, he was focused on what he had gained. The time with his children, the laughter, the simple joy of being a family. It was more than he could have ever hoped for. As they drove home, Tom glanced at Lisa, who was smiling contentedly. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start, and that was enough for now. Tom knew there was still work to do. The road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but he was ready. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was on the right path, a path that led to the family he had always wanted.